Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Performance Talk. My name is Yul Gordon. I am excited to get started today with our friend Charles Chase Phelps. Charles, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing right now, and we can get this show rolling.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited to be here and catch up with you. When we were chatting earlier in the week, and you're kind of discussing how we just get back to kind of backyard barbecue, just sitting and talking. I was
Right.
definitely feeling that. So I love to just kind of talk real and honestly about what's going on in the field. So thanks for having me. So my background, and obviously in the performance field, but kind of going all the way back. My dad was in the Navy, so I always had some ties to the military, which ultimately ended up kind of coming full circle to what I'm doing currently. But a lifelong athlete, was very fortunate, actually. It's kind of rare that I actually found some coaches in high school that knew what they were doing, right? I had some people actually training me at Velocity Sports Performance in the early 2000s that were pretty legitimate. And I basically kind of, my eyes were open to like, oh, there's actually a rhyme and reason in science to, getting faster, stronger. And so I was super fortunate to be able to actually, start training right from a fairly early age. I was obviously, like most of us kind of start off as meatheads in the weight room. And then as I got into college, I played lacrosse in college. So kind of keeping myself training, to better my own performance. But then I learned that there was an entire field of exercise science and human performance that you could actually get an education in. So I went to Roanoke College and started my internship path from there. So I bounced around from Radford University, Old Dominion University, IMG Performance Institute down in Florida.
Right.
I was very fortunate. I got my first job over at Hampton University. And from there, I was kind of thrust into a leadership position fairly early. As a 23-year-old, I was an assistant and the head strength coach at the time. I was basically there for about 2 months, decided he wanted to move on and left. And so I kind of, as this young 23-year-old, don't know my head from my butt kind of deal, was pushed into a director role and was able to actually kind of, figure out that I actually knew what I was doing a little bit, even though I probably...
Like, hey, kid, you're running a show.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Get started.
Exactly. And which was great in a lot of ways because I was like, hey, I'm pretty decent at this. I can hold my own, even though thinking back to the stuff I did, I would never do again, kind of one of those.
Right.
And I was actually had a little bit of call it like a gap in my resume, in that I made a poor decision, a little life lesson for myself, that I took a job that wasn't in writing, left my gig at Hampton, and ended up kind of being in between jobs for about 6 months, did some private training with athletes, and then was very fortunate that I landed with the Naval Special Warfare Development Group as the strength coach. I was there for about 3 years and then went to Stanford University to start up their applied sports science program. I was there for about 3 years. And then in my current role, I'm the human performance advisor for Naval Special Warfare Group 8. And I've been there for almost 5 years.
Okay, you broke your 3-year cycle.
Yeah, exactly. I've been bumping around. And so I've been more glued to where I'm at now. I got family in the area, which obviously,
like you said, it's almost like coming home, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So when we were out in California, my wife and I looked at each other. We want to start a family. The gig in athletics was good, but California's cost of living, it's tough to survive out there. And we decided, hey, this is a great opportunity to help our nation's service members, and then obviously come home and be around family and kind of get.
Yeah, we froze up there just a little bit, but I think we're back.
Yep, gotcha.
But usually when it freezes up out here, it doesn't in the background, and production can draw that out. So we just usually keep on moving, and it's been good so far. They've been successful. So we got you, but I do know that you were talking about the part I might have missed was about your family, starting a family out there in California.
Yeah, so I was out at Stanford. It was honestly a kind of a dream job. What I was getting to do with the athletes out there, it was just the staff, the sports staff, the actual coaches and the athletes was phenomenal. But I think in this field, we kind of, as we get a little older, we kind of change our priorities a little bit. You start looking at, does this actually make sense for my entire life? And living in the Bay Area financially with the housing costs and just cost of living in general, we decided, coming back to a little bit closer to home, and then obviously helping out with our nation service members was a great mix and match professionally and personally, which is kind of, the secret sauce. If you can line those two things up, you're in a good spot.
Now, if we have, first of all, I'm going to say thanks for helping out, service members and as a veteran, as a retired veteran, I always appreciate guys who, want to give back to in that way a little bit, understanding that, it's a unique life and lifestyle that service members lead. And the physical part of it is real. The health part of it is real. And there's kind of two components there. But anyway, let's getting back to the profession and let's go down a rabbit hole just for a second. You talked about cost of living and being able to afford living where you're at. In this profession, we both know. Now, I started way before you. And I say that just to say I'm old. But, there was there's an understanding way back then. I had great coaches in high school, great coaches in college, but there was a misunderstanding of how to use the weight room. No, I won't say a misunderstanding. There was limited understanding on how to use the weight room and those kind of things. But the coaches I had were kind of ahead of their time.
That's awesome.
They understood that, in the late 70s, early 80s, they understood that being stronger, helped with a lot of things, if not just in general health.
Right.
But athletically. But this profession, as much as it's grown in those kind of arenas, we haven't made the strides in compensation for young professionals, especially young professionals, that I think we should have. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is definitely the hot topic. And I think there's some kind of hard realities that we probably need to face too within that. And I'll kind of lead into that. But my start in the profession was I did 2 years of unpaid internships, right? So just kind of like surviving, right? Luckily, a couple of them, they gave you housing. So obviously like moving to a place to like work for free for 12 hours a day. The housing component was a big deal, but I did 2 years of unpaid internships, and then my first job at Hampton University, I got paid $23,000 a year, and I think I was pushing 70, 75 hours a week working with football and everything. Right. And like that probably is not uncommon for a lot of people, right? They can always think back to their first gig and be like, man, I got paid
a lot of that,
yeah, next to nothing. And so I am. Gosh, I'm a believer. It's like I have two sides of my brain that is a proponent and against that, because I think there's something to be said for like grinding and clawing your way through scenarios in which like you're learning, right? The compensation is kind of from a learning and experiential perspective. Right. Like you have to do it. You have to learn from people. You have to be in the trenches, so to say, to build expertise. And you're not just going to climb up to the highest paying gig right from the bat, right? So part of my brain goes, hey, that's part of it. You got to do that. You got to earn it. The second part of it is that there's just been a complete taking advantage of our profession.
That's where I'm at, man.
Yeah. And I think that what you're seeing nowadays is that if you go to any major university, there's just an assumption now that you're going to have strength and conditioning or athletic trainers there, right? It's almost like it's just supposed to be there. And so the coaching staffs know that this is what we get. We're going to have somebody doing our weight room work now, or our speed work, or whatever they want to have happen, and that we expect it now as kind of the sport coaching perspective. And I think that's good because we've normalized the importance of training in enhancing our student athletes or our athletic programs. But I think also it is also kind of devalued like the uniqueness and expertise that it takes to truly do a good job. Like they kind of just look at it like, hey, we're going to have people in the weight room. They're going to be getting stronger. End of story. But the reality is that we know in any profession, you have really good high level practitioners, and you have people who,
Right.
kind of might be knuckleheads, right? So
Right.
I think the inability for those sport coaches to differentiate between the high levels and maybe the lower levels of practitioners is what is creating kind of a neutral compensation field. And so they're not necessarily getting smacked in the face with amazing positive outcomes that make them go, this person is worth $200,000 versus $60K. And so I think that kind of leads into like, how do we assess our value? How do we assess success? Like, what does success look like for a strength and conditioning coach when there's so many factors that may influence what team you're with, what the coaching styles, the resources you have, the buy-in, the compliance from the athletic department. And I think our challenges are going to come to what are those ways that we can show a true acute consequence of our interventions. And so a lot of what we do takes years to maybe come to fruition, right? Like, it's not an overnight success. It may take a long-term development plan, and coaching life, in the coaching life, they have very short-term mindset sometimes, like, hey, I got to win or I'm going to be fired in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And so how do you blend something that has a slow cooking approach with an immediate consequence business? And I don't know if we have exactly figured out a way to show that immediate value in the way that I think, would probably elicit higher compensation levels.
That is definitely a well thought out explanation that I haven't heard put like that before, which makes sense, because we do, strength and conditioning is and performance improvement overall, and just in general, is not an acute solution.
Exactly.
It's not, you can't say, Coach, we'll be faster next week.
Right.
We'll be
100%.
we'll be stronger next month.
Yep.
It's in many ways the fastest that we could legitimately, I don't even want to say guarantee, but say something could happen. The fastest we could say it, from my experience, is about 90 days.
Yeah. You need time and consistent time.
Yeah, it's about 90 days if they're consistent, if there's intention, all those other things that go along with making sure that, okay, you're going to get stronger. You don't just go lift weights and get stronger.
Right.
You have to lift with you have to go through all the whole process with some kind of intent.
100%.
Or otherwise, But talking about the compensation, I think that what you just explained, as well as a perception to coaches and other professionals of what we do. We're not just standing in there watching the weight room. Now, I know the high level programs get that.
Right.
But some of the other programs around, and some of the programs in the high schools, we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But they think we're just kind of watching the weight room and not really doing anything. There's no really, there's a lot more that goes to it. When you talk about the internships, I know that some of our listeners have asked me, offline a few times, well, don't you like internships? Oh, I love them. You got to do them.
Right.
That's where everything that you learned comes to fruition, but also you start to realize the things you didn't learn and that you're going to have to learn. That's where you start to get those things that, okay, I thought I was ready, and I'm not quite ready.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or totally. I'm going to have to do a whole bunch more to get ready. So I am not knocking internships or anything like that. I just want the, guys like you to be valued in this profession.
Yeah. So
that everyone that's come before you has made it mean something.
Right. I think, that's a very important part, is making sure that, the work that's been done is actually positively capitalized on, right? Like, people have sacrificed and really put the time in to show the value through the last 3, 4, 5 decades.
Right.
And I think that's 100%. Like, where are we continuing to push the, the meter, so to say, and in a way that makes it better for the future professionals. And then in theory makes it better for those student athletes that they're going to be supporting, right? Because inherently we're a service-based profession. We're here to help other people with their goals and pursuits. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think it's very tough. I think the field right now is in a really interesting transition and has a little bit of an identity crisis happening, because now you have so much of this sports science piece that's been influencing, what strength coaches are focusing on. And now there's a data science piece that's, been kind of slammed on top of that one. And so you have these coaches that are supposed to be wearing multiple hats that really are almost completely separate professions. Like, if you think about, coding languages and programming and understanding high-level biostatistics, people spend their entire educational careers learning that. And then we have these position descriptions for these jobs at some of these Power Fives where they go, well, and we want you to know R or Python, and you need to be able to know MATLAB, and you have to understand all these things. And that's a full-time job for people. And it's just being tagged on. And to the point of the initiation of this conversation, is there an increase in compensation for that skill set, right? So let's say that I'm asking you to be a strength and conditioning coach and now do some applied sports science with this, data analytic component. You're not being compensated for increasing your skill set for that organization on the data analytic component. You're being paid as a strength coach, but now you're being expected to know an entirely different profession, but they're not going to pay for it.
Here's the other part of it, man. I don't think they realize that it's not only skill sets, but like athletic trainers. I spent the first part of the 2000s explaining to people that because my background is in sports medicine, that a strength and conditioning coach and an athletic trainer, while right now they're still pretty easy. I won't say easy, but you can still find athletic trainers who are CSCS.
Right.
But that's not fair to either the profession or the athletic trainer, because that's 2 full-time jobs.
Right, totally.
That's 2 completely full-time jobs, and there's no way you can convince me outside of a leadership position where you're like, I think we have performance, and then we have all those components of performance. We have performance, then we have strength conditioning, athletic training, physical therapy, nutrition, psychology. We have all those things that are, under the performance umbrella.
Yeah.
So, and any one of those professions can come up and be the performance director.
Right.
But not everyone can go do the other job.
Totally.
So I can't go. First of all, I'm no longer licensed as a athletic trainer, so I can't go be an athletic trainer. I can go be a strength conditioning coach.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I have a doctorate in psychology, but I can't go be a sports psychologist.
Right.
I can be a researcher, but I can't go be the team psychologist. I don't have a license.
Right.
Would I want to do it anyway? No, it's 2 full-time jobs.
Right. Yeah.
It's 2 full-time jobs, and almost certainly anywhere. Now, I'm not just putting it on colleges or our profession, but almost certainly when you do 2 full-time jobs, you're not going to get paid appropriately.
Yeah, they're taking a mile from you, right? They're good to go. They're perfect. We got one less billet or position we have to fill because we got somebody pulling double duty.
Yep, exactly. And that person, while I think it's good for everybody to grind, preferably when you're younger.
Yeah.
But and like you said, you might be, working for housing and a meal ticket at the college training table.
Right.
That might be what you're doing, and doing a little personal training on the back end just to put a little gas money in your car.
Yeah. Yeah, I think kind of just to finish up the concept of the compensation and value with all of that is, I mean, it speaks a lot if they're asking for more qualifications on top of a base job and not paying more. Like they kind of they're speaking with their wallet, so to say. They're like, oh yeah, like you should just be doing this because we don't think what you do is already hard enough or full in your schedule and responsibilities in your plate, right? So you can easily just add this component onto your job because what you already do, you're just a bench press coach, right? All you do is stand in the weight room and count reps. And I think that's kind of that perception piece is educating, administrators or people who are going to be in power positions of influence, I guess you would say, in the field, to say, hey, like there is an entire dynamic happening behind the scenes to improve these athletes, and it's not just sets, reps, and weights and things like that. So it's definitely going to be interesting, especially as you get into all this NIL, big Power 5 money going nuts. Because really, I had a conversation with a performance director with a big time blue blood basketball program. And one of the things that we came out was, and honestly, it's not, I don't like it from an amateur, like I played college sports. So like from just a purist, it doesn't make me feel awesome about the field. But I think it's the reality is a lot of these performance positions, how they're showing value is in recruiting, right? Like how do you let a coach know that you're worth something? Land them a 5-star recruit, right? Get them some of the best players in the country to go there because they want to train with you, or you're helping entice the package where they can come in and develop. And that's how you show value to a coach who's going to say, hey, that guy helped me land 2-3 amazing top 10 recruits last year. And then the contract comes up, he's going to get paid more, right? Versus if you're not impacting recruiting, in a lot of ways, players do make the difference.
That's just telling us to, as professionals, that's just saying, now we're going to make you an assistant recruiter.
100%. And I think,
which is, I get what you're saying when you say, that it's kind of, we look where we try to add value.
Right.
And we always want to be a value added proposition, preferably in our field, doing something in our field. But, I'm with you in a sense of as we start to work through this stuff, we have to start to understand that you're going to bleed over in some other things.
Right.
I mean, because there's some very good athletic training programs in some of the Power 5 and even the smaller schools. Some very good athletic training programs that are, a kid, especially in the lower sports, they're picking because I say lower sports, but not the top 3, but like soccer, like that, where athletes have been injured, but they're still coming in with a scholarship and they want to know, hey, am I going to be taken care of from a medical standpoint?
Right.
So those are important, markers that they base their decisions on.
100%. Yeah.
So there's no reason that the strength program can't be the same.
Agreed.
And the other thing about value added and how value is shown is when you show up and you're a staff of one, and we're gonna, we're paying you above what the average is, and look at all the stuff you got, and then you say, okay, how many staff members do I have, or how many assistants do I have?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I have experienced that a couple recent career changes. So when I was at Stanford and I left my job with NSW and I went there to start their applied sports science program, they had been doing stuff kind of more of a lab setting, right, with more biomechanists and things like that, but that nothing to really pull it out of the lab onto the field into the weight room. Right. And I came on as one person. And I will say this: my time there, I have nothing negative to say. I loved it. Tons of support, but I was solely the only person in that spot. So I was supposed to hire people. I had a couple interns and a couple people assist me, but my ability to be effective was limited by how many clones of myself or people supporting the initiatives I had, and that was a huge limiting factor. because once I did have some success with certain teams, the word got out a little bit, and I had other coaches requesting me to come in and kind of help do whatever, problem solving that they had going on. And the next thing there's only so many times teams can practice, right? It's going to be fairly limited in the diversity in which teams can play or practice. So you can only be so many places at once. And we immediately ran into issues year one, being like, well, I can't be at that practice. I got to be at this practice. And it definitely showed itself. And then in my most recent job, when I took my current gig now, we have about a staff of 15 under a big umbrella of multiple locations. So we have a team at each location. And when I started 5 years ago, it was just myself. And I was flying to these other locations to provide remote performance support, which went about as well as you'd think.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Not well.
Yeah.
And it speaks to, the power of people and being able to actually have somebody who can embed or actually be there in person and provide presence. That is how you make impact. It's not by getting more GPS or more technology or even more money. It's the people, the team is the force multiplier.
Right. I agree with you 100%. This is still, regardless of technology, this is still a face-to-face profession.
Mm-hmm.
It's you can do a lot of things remotely, and you can pass along a lot of information remotely, but the best programs I've seen since 2018 are because they didn't fall victim completely to technology. They use remote situations when they have to,
right?
But it's not the norm for those programs.
Yep. No, 100%.
It's hard to provide a service when you're not there.
Yeah. I think that is
see you.
Fantastic point, because we now use some of the apps for remote training because our folks are traveling all over the world. So how do you make it easy for them? How do you make it intuitive? You put it right on their phone. Now wherever they are, they can access things that you did for them. But when I think about the last 5 years in my current job, the most success we've had, and honestly the most fun and just engaging part of what we're doing, is we still do whiteboard workouts, right? Mm-hmm. Which guys come in or girls, whoever, and they look at the whiteboard and they ask me or strength coaches, hey, like, what's up with workout one today? What are we doing? What am I doing here? My back hurts. How are we doing this one? And then, it builds that face to face, and you're in there watching them do it. And, the military sector is very different for a lot of people because, they're coming from collegiate athletics. So you're used to group training, you're used to more control or consistency. And this has provided a little bit of that flavor for us. And I think the bottom line, though, is it creates that human perspective, that relationship and the bond, because you're not sitting there talking about the workout the whole time. You're talking about what happened over the weekend or what's going on in the crazy news cycles or, whatever. And that's almost the more important part of the training. Isn't just the X's and O's of the program, but it's really, getting to know the people and actually maybe being a little bit of a stress reliever during a really crazy, hectic day.
And just from my own experience, understanding how the lifestyle is in the military. A lot of people would think that, it's a physical training all over the place. It's that type of lifestyle, but it's not. The expectation is that you're going to maintain your fitness and you're going to be physically fit and you're going to be prepared to do a lot of physical things. That's the expectation. The reality is, if you don't do it with some intention, if there's not some programmed intention in there, that strength coaches have to put a personality on, so put it that way.
Yep.
But if there's not some there, you can get out of shape in the service as fast as any, because a lot of guys have desk jobs.
Yeah.
And when I say desk job, I don't mean they're lazy. I mean they're sitting behind the computer and they're doing some stuff you probably don't want to know about.
Right.
You
Totally.
know what I mean? But the truth is they're sitting
Right.
or they're deployed where they don't get to do exercise, intentional exercise.
Right.
Somewhere like that. So while the perception is that, the military in general is a lifestyle of fitness, the reality is, and this is kind of my own lived reality, if you can find the time and it's what you want to do, yes.
Right.
Otherwise, it's 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 tough to maintain that level of fitness that you need to. So I think it's past the time for guys like yourself and professionals in this field be involved with our nation's fighting men and women to make sure that they are or have the opportunity to be at the highest level of physical readiness that they could be at.
Right. Yeah, that's it's super interesting to hear you talk about that because that is a very common theme. So one of the things I often hear, and I work with naval special warfare, and so you have exactly what you said. You have this kind of preconception of like what some of these folks are going to be and look like, and the training mentality and the warrior mindset, and all that's there. But the reality of the job is it's not all kicking doors down and shooting guns and blowing stuff up, right? Like
Right.
that's just not it. And so I've heard from so many people that the first thing to go on a busy day is their personal fitness and self
Right.
care,
Right.
and they got to do the job. They got to do the training. They got to take care of people under them. They got to do whatever
Yeah.
is being tasked to them. And so the first thing that goes is that. And then you throw in the component of people having families, right? So if you have a wife, children, a husband, whatever you got going,
Yeah.
and you want to get PT in the morning, well, what happens if you got to feed a couple kids and get them to school in the morning? So then that goes out the door, and then now you're scrambling to find time in the rest of the day in an already busy full schedule. So
PT becomes 4:30, 5 o'clock,
right,
or,
and
or or 10 o'clock at night.
yeah, and the other thing that I learned that I thought was very interesting is there's so much planning and coordination that goes into potentially a physically intense evolution, right? So if you're going to go do some training, some land warfare training somewhere, it doesn't just happen, right? There's
Right.
hotels, there's
Yeah. Yeah.
accommodations, there's planning, there's coordinating medics, there's getting 10 different things all set up, and guess where that
Yeah.
starts?
That's
On a
30.
computer and
That's
on a phone,
yeah.
right?
That's
So
that's that's 60, 90 at the bare minimum on a quick turnaround. 30 days worth of planning.
100%. So you have so much of this like invisible stressors that kind of goes into a lot of these people that potentially eliminates opportunity for maintaining a high level of fitness or performance. And it's definitely shifted my perspective on what performance is. I think that's been a really big discussion point on what is performance, right? Your operational definition of performance really has to be fluid because there's so many different jobs in the military,
Yeah.
literally thousands of them, and performance for each one of those. And you could be at one command and have 55 different rates all operating simultaneously, and each one of them may have a different version of what performance is for that job.
Right.
And to just say that everything that we're going to do that's going to be performance related is going to be in the weight room is missing the bigger picture of what it means to be successful in their job in the military.
And
And
take and yeah, man. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
no, you're good. And I think that has opened my eyes up to, we as performance coaches, really need to understand the bigger picture. That lifestyle sustainment, things that are going to, carry on for years is really what matters. It's not a race to Saturday where there's a game or, next weekend where we got to get you in shape for it. It's how do we make sure that we're putting you in a position to make good decisions over 15, 20 plus years. So that way you're not riddled with, poor quality of life for the next 30 years after your time in service. And
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I used to say, everything we do in athletics, is usable in the military. But now with the advent of performance coaches, helping us with the physical, psychological, nutritional, all that side in the service, you can almost see where, like many other things, everything that we do with service members can then be applied to athletics.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because it's a long term, it's a more of a long term approach, and to be honest, more of a holistic approach in that arena, because it has to be. And that's something that I think, looking back at athletics and working with athletes, I start talking about, okay, let me catch this athlete at 13 or
Right,
14. Let me
right,
start talking to mom and dad, and let me start talking to mom and dad and telling them the truth, not, you know, that I can get their child to the best college that they want to go to. No, let's tell them the truth. Here's the options. I know he's only 14, but he's 5'8", 200 pounds. He needs to start eating better.
right, right,
His nutrition needs to be better. Well, he wants to play football. That's great. He's 13. He's going to grow out of some of that. He's going to get some body changes, yada yada yada. But from mom and dad's standpoint, let's start at the training table, because
right.
it's going to make a difference. And the foolishness about you don't need nutrition that you hear on some internet shows, that's foolishness. Not everybody's body's going to respond the same to every food or everything you ingest. Some
Hmm.
guys are naturally and metabolically situated that they can get away with eating things that others can't, that most people can't in many cases. But
Right.
let's get that training mindset and that mindset early that they need to then, when they get to junior high and they're expected to start lifting weights, or they get to high school, I'm sorry, and they're expected to start lifting weights, it's not a major shock.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not a major shock when you're gonna run 30 sprints instead of the 8 or 10 you used to run when you were in Pop Warner,
Right.
or or,
Yeah.
or, or whatever the case may be. So performance from those two perspectives, while very similar in the process, the approaches are different.
Right.
But I think what's done in one can easily be looked at from the other and say, I can take something good from that.
No, 100%. I think there's always going to be some carryover, right? The principles and the fundamentals are there, and you can apply those based on the contextual scenario of what those people have going on, and still be fairly similar in methodology, but there might be little tweaks and turns here and there. So I 100% agree.
One of the things that I am happy with, sort of the new breed of military, and not to put it way out of bounds, but I'm happy they're kind of getting away from the eyeball test for the body image.
Right. Right.
There used to be a bad. I mean, I seen guys that were physically, that could go,
Right.
but I watched them get harassed solely on their body type.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
that's
think the SEAL teams, they have a term that I've heard before. They call them iron marshmallows,
Yeah.
right? And so,
Yeah.
like, they don't look to be the 0% body fat stereotype, but
Right.
they are tough as nails and run just as fast or do as many pull ups as people. So the
Yeah.
perception is that they're weak or whatever, but the performance doesn't change.
Yeah, and I think in athletics, while there's still a little bit of what they call the eye test to that in
Right.
athletics, I think you know that has been at least shown the door.
Right.
And because you have a lot of guys, especially in the sport of football, but also in many other sports, that when you see them walking down the hallway, you're like, surely that's not a football player, or surely that's not a lacrosse player. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And then they get out on the field, and you're like, that dude's all American, man.
Right. Yeah.
He's the man.
Yeah.
Or that young lady is is a beast.
Mm.
You know, you think she can't run, but she's up and down the field all day.
Right. That's an interesting point because not one thing, but a very positive thing that has come out of the recent integration of GPS and heart rate and technology is educating coaches on their own team.
Yeah.
I've had a ton of discussions with coaching staffs where they think somebody's based on the eye test, right? Like that person looks out of shape. They look like they're carrying non-functional mass. They're like they look like they're not in shape. Bottom line, a bunch of negative terms that we won't dive into.
Right. Oh, we know them all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And honestly, I'll come back to them and be like, what performance outcomes are they not meeting? Are they not keeping up in certain drills? Are they not, meeting some type of fitness standard that you've set? And they'll be like, well, they just don't look like they're running with everybody. They look like they're out of shape. And I would pull up some of their numbers. I'd be like, hey, this person, they ran just as fast, just as far, and maintained a physiological load. Their heart rates and things like that were not out of control. So while you may think that they look fat or chubby or whatever terms that they were calling them, like they're meeting what everyone else is doing, and if that's what the standard is, that they're doing it. So your perception of them is based on more of a bias than an actual reality. And I'll tell you what, I've had some conversations that did not go well. Like they were like, you can't tell me that. Those numbers aren't true. And I'd be like, all right, well, you do you. Do you trust your speedometer in the car? Because that's what we're doing here, right? You have to have a little bit of trust in the fact that these are objective metrics. What you do with them is what matters, but this is what it's saying.
I've had those same conversations back in 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6 with coaches, and they're saying and what I at the time I just used straight film from a camcorder.
Yep.
And filmed a few practices. Now I was like, and put the clips together. I was like, Coach, tell me what you're seeing? Well, it just doesn't look like. So okay, we put the film up there. I said, okay, this is recorded, but it's recorded real time, with no preparation time. No, the kids don't know what we're doing. This is you running your practice. I said, now tell me what you see. Well, I said, Coach, this young lady is in front of everybody. I said, and while she did not finish in the top 3 or 4 in your 2-mile run, which was, we'll talk about using the appropriate measures in a minute.
Arbitrary.
Yeah, which is arbitrary. I said, but she came in ahead of 8 of your starters. So I'm not seeing what you're seeing when you're talking about these kids. I said, the only thing that matters to me is that what I'm doing comes across as helpful for everybody and is fair to everybody.
Right.
I don't want what I'm doing to come across as being used for what's the word? Now I can't think of it. But to eliminate somebody from contention in something, don't put it on what I'm doing.
Right. It's almost like a scapegoat.
Yeah. So don't a discriminator. I say, don't use the numbers and the information I give you as discriminator for you not either playing someone, not wanting someone to do whatever. I said, don't do that. I said, because you're devaluing now what I do.
Right.
And like you said, the conversation didn't go very well.
Yeah.
But, after some time, and I was real persistent because I'm hard-headed like that. But after some time, I knew that just by watching that he recognized some things.
Mm-hmm.
And he recognized that he was carrying his biases, however we say that word.
Yeah.
into his decision-making. He wasn't being objective as a coach. He was doing something. And he was assembling his team based on what he liked, not based on what he liked for the sport, based on what he liked from a visual perspective.
Right. Yeah.
Look like.
Totally. That's an interesting one too, because to kind of like lead into more of like that education piece with the coaches and some of the GPS and things like that. Again, nothing is ever perfect. Like the art of coaching is always going to be fundamental, exactly. Right? Like you can't take one and just say, this is how we do it. This is what the data says. But one area that was really interesting, and some of the coaches who were very open-minded, we had fantastic discussions about drill intensity, right? So like I played lacrosse in college and I coached high school lacrosse for 7 years, right? So I kind of had a fortunate lens in which I could see from the performance perspective, but then from a coaching perspective and how we did practice planning and like how we fundamentally progress drills to increase skill acquisition or even like an energy system development piece. Like how can we make practice actually train them to be better at their sport? Like go figure. And a lot of times you had coaches who didn't have an understanding of the intensity or the demand that a drill that they were having their players do was. So they would say, hey, look, women's lacrosse, we're going to do a full field weave. So 3 players start on the end line and they run and they basically weave behind each other for the full field, passing just like old school basketball. And then they're going to come down and back. And they would do that for, 8, 10 reps. And by the time you're done with that, you just ran 8 to 10 200-yard sprints. And they'd be like, oh, that's just warming up. That's our stick work. And I'd be like, okay, well, stick work turned into 2,000 yards of sprinting. And now you're saying.
I'm sure that was, let's just say, sub-maximal work.
Yeah, totally. That's what it turns into, right? Players are smart. I was smart. I'd be like, oh man, this is the first quarter of practice. I better save something because we're only getting started. But it was interesting because coaches would be like, oh, this player's out of shape or this, and that's an easy drill. That's a stick work drill. Well, yeah, but
2,000 meters.
Exactly. So I think that there's been a really interesting kind of eye-opening experiences with some of these conversations for those that are open to have them to say, hey, coach, like, is there a way we can accomplish stick work without running them into the ground? Or is your intention to run them into the ground? Because if it is, boom, let's go. Yeah. So I think there's some interesting components to that I really think, in the next 5 to 10 years, we should have head coaches who are going to be much more in tune with how they progress and plan practices. You see it in Europe and Australia and some of these other sports have been doing it for 25, 30 years.
Right.
But I think the coaching field here, I think they're going to start catching up a little bit with that stuff.
Well, I will tell you that because I was involved with the sport of soccer for years and years. I mean, I played football and ran track in college, but my daughter coming through her college years was a soccer player. One of the things that I always questioned was, why do I see soccer teams out there running 3, 4, 5 mile runs? Now, an occasional 5K or 3K, okay.
Right.
Check your general to check a general fitness level if you're going to use it for anything other than, just a esprit de corps run.
Right.
Why are they out there doing that when their sports requirements or demands are sprint, jog, walk, stop?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If your sport demands that, can you do that over and over and over and over?
Right.
Or can you run one steady state pace for 30 minutes or 90 minutes? Which one do you want in soccer? I seen teams come out where girls were bigger, more muscular, and they could run up and down the field all day.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask them to run 2 miles, it was long face day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was long face day, and they weren't hearing any of that. But did I? What was my perception? Is that they were out of shape? No. They were conditioned for their sport.
Right. 100%. You see that in football, right? Like the whole 300-yard shuttles for your D tackles. Like,
yeah.
What are we doing? I remember, this example, gosh, this must have been 10, 15 years ago. You remember there was a D tackle, Trent Williams.
Yeah,
He played
yeah,
for it was the Redskins at the time, but the Commanders.
yeah,
And I think he
yeah,
got like in trouble. He wasn't allowed to play because he was failing the conditioning test.
yeah. The 300. Yeah, I remember that.
And I'm not saying, I don't know those contexts. He may have been, totally out of shape. Who knows? But, they're having him try to meet this standard that has nothing to do with what he is getting paid football to, and
No,
perform. He's there to
what you want him to do.
100%. And so I think that's a very interesting point that you have coaches that kind of come with like, this is what we did, right? Like we always talk about that.
Right.
This is what we did growing up, and it was hard. So therefore it was productive. And I think that concept of hard and being productive is not necessarily synonymous anymore.
Yeah.
That 1,000 burpees is hard, but that doesn't mean it's productive for getting better at your sport.
I call them, I call them mental days.
Right.
We're gonna test where you are mentally. Now, our and how often do with the athletes I work with, those days come far and few between.
Right.
Because especially if you're, I don't care what level of college, I don't care if you're NAIA, Division III, or whatever. If you're going to college to play a sport, you either have a certain level of motivation or you don't. If you're not motivated to be there, you'll get weeded out pretty quick. It doesn't matter what level of college it is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You'll get weeded out pretty quick because the other guys want to be there. The other young ladies want to be there. So, I don't worry about mentally their toughness from that perspective too much, but occasionally it's a change, and we call them mental days.
Yeah.
We don't call them what they're not.
Right.
We're gonna train your endurance. Well, just to see how long you can do something that's ridiculously hard and it has no purpose, that's wasting time.
It could be counterproductive in some cases. I think that's such an interesting point, because I think good coaching should take into consideration ways to provide adversity through physical or psychological means,
Right.
in a properly progressed, practice planning and preseason developments, right? If you have to have one day that we're going to make something super hard, like, maybe we're missing the boat on how we should be, developing young athletes through some of these processes.
Yeah.
So I think it's super interesting, because the effectiveness of people like ourselves only goes as far as some of the sport coaches, right? Like we have to have an in-tune dance with them on making sure that our scientific knowledge and things that we know research has shown to improve the efficacy of, training interventions has to be, really matched with what that coach wants to do. But then the coach also has to, make sure that they're weaving those principles into their culture and how they do things. And that's, if you can find a coaching staff who truly listens, and not necessarily listen as in like, I will do what you tell me, but ask questions, goes to their engaged,
part of the process.
And just goes, hey, what do what would you do here? What do you think is best for this particular, circumstance? Those are the scenarios in which everyone gets better. Student athletes ultimately will have the best chance to thrive or succeed in that environment. We can do everything we can do, but if it's not in conjunction with that coaching staff or whoever is really leading the charge, we're only going to get so far. So
I think one of the things is, understanding, and this is kind of a transition to another subject, but understanding what is required of the athlete and knowing that there are more exercises or types of exercise that can accomplish those requirements than just a single one. So the way you do it may be different than the way I do it.
Right.
But are we headed the right direction? Are we
Right.
headed the correct, or we go in the correct way? There's 100 different paths to get there, but is it right for the athlete? And is it, are you selecting them appropriately?
Yeah, 100%.
So, one of the things that I'm glancing up at my clock now, and I'm going. It's already almost an hour, and that's because we could go on for another couple of hours, I believe.
Easily.
But this is why I love this format. But so as we get ready to wrap up, and I don't make all my production crew mad by going over like I so often do. This final question and this final statement. Know that we're probably going to invite you back in the future because I think we got a lot more to talk about. But the final question is: what type of advice would you give a new strength coach, an old strength coach, and a strength coach right where you are right now, right in the heart and the meat of your career?
Mm.
So considering those three levels, if you were tagged to give advice,
Yep.
young, old, in the prime of life.
Okay. That is a great question. I don't know if I have the perfect answer. There's no perfect answer, but the biggest one that I am now coming to realize. So I'm in my late 30s. I have two young kids now. My life priorities are shifting. Young coaches, get it while you can. And what I mean by that is work the hours appropriately with respect to yourself, right? Like don't just give yourself away, but take the jobs that are going to be hard, take the jobs that are going to be, more transient, take the jobs where you're moving somewhere, do the things that are going to put you in the experience and go learn from the best people you can. Because I'm getting to a point now where opportunities to me are more driven by my personal situations where I want to be present for my family, right? Like what I did in my early 20s, I'm not going to miss, some of the experiences with my family now. So I think like your 20s, or wherever you are in the profession, we'll just say the first 5 to 10 years, take some of those risks, take some of those chances to go move somewhere if you can, really try and put yourself in the fire, so to say, like create that mastery and expertise. Because I think when you get to like my level, gosh, I'm figuring out all the time areas that I need to learn and dive into because of the way the field is kind of evolving and all these disciplines are kind of doing this big like mashed potato shepherd's pie of integration together. And I need to sharpen my tool sets, but I always fall back on my inherent knowledge base that I really, really refined in my first 5 to 10 years of being a coach. Like really get into the weeds, dive down the rabbit holes of strength and conditioning, go out there, experience things. I actually have two coaches on my staff that are in their mid to late 50s. And so I have a ton of discussions with them about like what drives them now, like what is their motivation in the weight room that they've been in for 35 plus years. And it's been very unique. And a lot of times I've actually heard this out of one of their coaches' mouth. So I'm not saying, he goes, yeah, I just got really comfortable, right? Like I knew what I knew and I felt like I could always rely on some of the basic tenets that I've had for 30 years. And he goes, I really want to be put into a new scenario where I feel nervous again. And so I think finding opportunities maybe within your current job or, whether it's going and finding, something local to your area where you're learning from a skill set or a person that has an expertise that you may not know about and really trying to like re-excite yourself into a position where you're like, oh, I'm not a total pro in this. This is something that I need to learn more about. So it's kind of pulling that lifelong student mentality back out of yourself because, after 30 years, people are darn good at what they do. Like they've made mistakes. They've done it right. They've done it wrong. They can pick through it. And so I think the conversations I've had with the guys on staff are, I need to throw myself back into something where I feel like, holy cow, I'm a little like nervous. I need to be on my game to learn this because I haven't done that in a while.
Getting out of your comfort zone is something I think it's important for everybody at different stages of the game we call life. But I think it's really important for older guys like me, guys that because we get good at what we do. We get recognizably good at what we do. and then we sit there, and everything starts to catch up.
Right.
Then everything starts to go by. And while the fundamentals of what we do and the foundation of what we've done is always good, but sometimes some of those things get washed away with the tide that rolls past you.
Right.
If you
Right.
don't keep up.
Yeah.
And who says we can't row a boat as well as everybody else?
Totally. 100%.
So all you have to do is be willing and care about it. Okay,
Yeah.
the final group.
Which one is that? Is that my age?
Your age. What do you say to guys exactly where you are? And here's what I've always thought to be the hardest part is for us to give advice to our peers.
Mm.
You know, that guy that considers himself your equal.
Yeah.
How do you give, or that person, how do you give him or her advice?
I think revisit the fundamentals, right? I would say that I'm at 15 years, and I would say my first 5 to 10, I kind of did what I talked about with the younger people. I went and worked places and did the things that taught me, I didn't know anything, and I built myself coaching experience and things like that. And then you kind of get a little bored almost, where you're like, hey, I want to learn something new and sexy and fancy. And some of these other fringe knowledge bases that aren't necessarily the meat and potatoes. And I feel like maybe I'm speaking to myself, revisit fundamental physiology, revisit the inherent laws of the biomechanics and how things, on a really simplistic level are happening, even though simple doesn't mean easy, or simple doesn't mean that it's not, that there isn't a massive amount happening under the hood. So I think for myself or somebody like myself, now that my knowledge base has definitely grown, kind of go back to some of the things that were taught as, beginning learners in this field and see if I have a different perspective on it. Maybe now it's more relevant to me in a certain context that I didn't have a ability to see at the time as a 25-year-old, but now I'm like, I'm 38. Now I understand why that means something. And so I think maybe pulling things full circle a little bit and going back to those fundamental meat and potatoes concepts that were taught with stress adaptation and basic, physiology and how the body operates.
Understanding how the body operates and going back to the basics, man, that is something that while I think at a critical point in one's career where you are right now, I call that a critical point because you got so much coming in and you're putting out so much knowledge as well to get new perspectives, but also to go back and freshen up the old perspectives and foundational work and stuff like that is critical. It lets those things, old foundations crack.
Right.
Unless you're paying attention to them and taking care of them. Listen, man, I could segue into another thing, but I'm not going to do it. I'm gonna try to make everybody happy. I didn't go over too far, but look, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I've enjoyed having you on. I think we have a lot more conversations in our future.
Yeah.
If not on the show, at least a message back and forth. Don't hesitate if we can do anything for you. But it's been a pleasure having you on, and we hope you come back.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your service.
Yes, I appreciate you saying that. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been Performance Talk. Our guest today has been Charles Chase Phelps, and we're out.